Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hi there, guys. I'm fine thinking yourself. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, my name is John, and I'm very excited about this whole dynamic about single parents, what we can do about it. I've been mentoring a whole lot of guys in addiction, so yeah, I'm excited about this and how we can look for a way forward.
So, John, let me start with you. You talk about mentoring young men. You talk about all of that. I want to understand for you, what do you? I mean, this is part of our conversation around Father's Day. What do you make of this whole conversation about fathers and fathers in the home? You're a father yourself. Well, yeah.
Absolutely. Let me start by saying that I had an absent father. He was always busy, but then again, his father was also absent, so the trauma really started at that stage. My father never saw one soccer game that played, was never at attendance at school functions, nothing like it. He was really absent father. Wasn't a bad man. He supported us, but he couldn't understand what that part was, what I needed, and I suffered of other guys at the school. Father used to come to the soccer game. I was not there. My dad was not there. And he was working most of the time. He was also in addiction in some way, in alcohol and stuff like that. And I followed suit.
Okay. Maybe you intro yourself. Has it mattered to you?
So a bit of the same story-ish. My parents got divorced, I think I was about 11 years old. I've always longed for the same feeling. And I think there's some things that I still long for, and I see it in my friends and my family sometimes. I mean, I don't even know how to shave. I still had to go to the barber to get myself shaved. So there's small little things that still think like, oh, I didn't learn this when I was that age, or I must still learn how to ride a bike. I'm not the sportiest young lad. I've never played rugby or football. I was always dancing or into the arts, and I think that for me was a bit different because even though I thought my dad wasn't there, I would people would still look at me like, oh, but he doesn't even play football or something. So it was a bit rough for me at stage, but I think I still long for that until today.
So let me say just two things and then we'll keep going. The first thing is South African young birth stats indicate the fact that more than half the children born in this country are born to single parents, right? So that's the first frame with which we look at this issue. And then the second is, and I want to touch base on this conversation. Are men in crisis? You lead and mentor young people engaged in substance abuse, etc., etc. Are young men in crisis? And as I say that, I can almost hear someone at home going, oh, here we go again. They forget that women have been in gender-based violence against women, the history of and bringing the girl child to work. May I say this? Just because one thing is a problem and we're speaking about another does not make the first less than. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not here to say that women are not facing headaches and challenges and profound challenges. The face of poverty in this country is largely female. So I get it. Mm-hmm. And the victims of violence, from a GBV point of view, are women.
Yeah.
It doesn't equally change the fact that the victims of murder are largely men. So two things, those two wrongs don't make anything right. There are two wrongs. And today we're talking about one wrong, given that it'll soon be Father's Day. Do you think men are in crisis?
I think absolutely. If I want to just go back a little bit to my childhood, I needed so much attention. We were 6 children, and my academicals was bad because I needed that. So I would sometimes hide myself in the bedroom, under the bed, so that my mother can just shout my name, so that I can know that she knows and acknowledge me. That how desperate I was for attention that I didn't get. It ultimately, I felt so detached that I eventually, at the age of about 13, 14, I joined a gang that accepted me. and they wanted me, and they heard me, although it was the wrong path, but I was felt accepted with them. And that's what I promised. When I came into recovery, I said, I'm never going to do that with my sons and with my children. I want to be there for them no matter what. For 20 years, I was in addiction. I wasn't doing that at all because the addiction had so much power over me. It's cunning, powerful, and baffling. So much. The more I wanted to give them attention, the more the brain just wouldn't allow me to do that in their point of addiction. And that's why what I think we need to, number one, educate our people. Addiction is not the evil. The addiction is not the evil. It's the trauma that's attached to that addiction that we have gone through, all of us, not being addressed. So I think we need to educate. It's not the addict or the addiction, because that's a stigma in itself.
Yeah.
You know, there's a guy by the name of Dr. Richard Swartz. He talks about IFAS, about parts of us. We have good parts and we have bad parts. I have a presentation that I do, dark side and light side. And I don't have a dark side. The woman says, I said, have you ever, when your child kept on crying, feel like throwing him against the wall? They say, yes, so that's your dark side.
Sure.
Let's talk about that.
Sure.
You know, and then there's a light side. So we have a tendency to move in the dark side, but there's a light side, and that is what we're talking about here this often, so that we can look to bring them out of that dark side, acknowledge them, accept it, and let it go, to move to the light side. And I think that's very important that we do that.
So, I mean, let me hear your perspective. Do you think men are in trouble?
I think men are in trouble. I like the fact from the GPV perspective, because so when I got into working with young boys in my community, everyone used to ask me, like, what's it about? What's the framework about it? And I always used to explain it as a time travel machine. So, meaning that in today's life, we see gender-based violence, and many of the perpetrators are men. They fall into the wayside. And then, so I won't be able to work with men myself. I'm still very young. So I thought, okay, let's work with the boys before they fall off the wayside. And it's been a challenge. It's been crazy. It's been a fun drive. But what I wanted to say is that we've started our men's program. It's been launched, so it's going to start very soon, which I'm very excited to be a part of. But I think young men are very, they've almost lost it a bit. Even in the boys program I have, if I explain something, it's almost like they don't know what I'm talking about. Or if I ask something simple, it's almost as if they have to grow up so quickly, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's an important question, and you know, this is the age-old issue. What does it mean to be a man? And I'll tell you why that is. Because if I don't have an idea what that means, Andrew Tate will tell me. Oh. If I don't have an idea what that means, the gang leader will tell me.
Yeah.
What do you tell young men?
I tell the young men that we've been brainwashed. So there's a certain image of a man that we've been trained to think that, oh, okay, a man should have a wife, a man should have a few kids, he should be the man of the house. That's the main saying, the man of the house. He should play football, he should take his kids to soccer practice, he should take his daughter to ballet practice. So we've been almost brainwashed to think, okay, that's the ideal thing. In my personal life, I was never, as I said before, wasn't a football player. I was never the one to kick around a ball. And I think that the image of a man has been it's been so confusing to young men. And to tell them, oh yeah, a man shouldn't cry, or a man shouldn't, you shouldn't be emotional or vulnerable. I think that's where we completely lost it. So saying you can't cry, and then bottling all of that in, eventually leads to something bigger. And so, yeah, that's what I think.
What is it for you?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of how do we check out as a man, and I have a simple answer for that. This probably sounds so simple, is when you're a man and you come to the bread bin and there's 4 slices of bread, you leave that for your family. Simple analogy, but it's so effective.
Presuming there's 4 members.
Yeah, each one a slice, and then you go without. And also another thing that I think, if we can do what we do in the light, we can do that in the dark. It's called integrity. what you can do, if you do it in the light, and you can do it in the dark. You can do the same thing in the dark. If you can't, we have in the Rehab called the 2-sugar rule, right?
Okay.
Sounds simple, but we try to use simple illustrations. If you can take 2 sugars in your coffee when everybody is looking and then throw in 4 when nobody's looking, you have a problem.
Sure.
You're not truthful.
Sure.
So we try and bring these simple analogies over so that young men and they can understand the whole process of doing that. And we are, if each one can just touch one, we can go forward.
Like, I've been thinking about this my own self and thinking, what does it mean? What is the best thing I do for my own family? All of us come from different contexts, all of that. And it kind of got me thinking. I thought, the one thing I know for a fact is, to a large extent, I am the first one. If my own, if you like, prayer is an important dynamic in our home.
Yeah,
if I'm not the first one to be praying for my home, I
Yeah.
shouldn't be expecting other people to do it.
Absolutely.
I think, but part of that is demonstrating power. I think we've seen the idea of masculinity being denigrated,
Yeah.
but we not all masculinity is toxic. And yes, I accept there's such a thing as toxic masculinity, but I don't think we should lose the idea of masculinity.
Yeah. No.
I think that would be a dangerous space. I do think, to some extent, I'm the first person to protect in my home. And that's why I have not only power, physical power, I can use that to abuse or to protect. I have power, whatever that looks like. And I always think to myself, if a thug comes in at home, I can't shove my kids forward and say,
you have to protect.
go, you tell them. I must be the first.
Absolutely.
And then the more contentious one is often the idea of provision, which you use the 4 slices idea.
That's right.
And I think sometimes it's very conflicting for men, which is what I wanted to leave that last because it moves to the next point, which is I find men have worn the idea of provider. And sometimes they become, it becomes confusing when women step into that role.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that women should stay at home and look after kids, please.
No.
That's not what I'm saying. No. But it does become a very interesting one for men to think through, what does the idea of providing looks like? Because equally so, there's a system of capitalism in the world, and that is beginning to show some real effects on men. Because you're finding, let me use this analogy. I was in the Northern Cape speaking to the community there, and it became quite clear to me that many men had lost their jobs.
Yeah.
And the identity being wrapped out in this idea of provider, when they were without work, I could quite see what stress that put them on. I could quite see, when I think about it today, I think about my own son, I think about my own girls. I would rather not have shoes than watch them suffer.
Absolutely.
And therefore, I can't imagine the double stress that comes with if you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And we're living in economic context right now. 2 out of 3 young people don't have jobs.
Sure.
They're, between the ages of 25 to 35, unemployment levels are near closer to 50%. That tells you a story of young people or men who should have been working.
Yeah.
So forget whether they're providing for anyone or not. Just working. They are not.
Yeah.
How are you finding the economic conversation as it relates to the work that you do?
Yeah, it's hard. There's so much unemployment. I always think of my mom. She was a domestic servant. She worked for people of the other color, but she was a woman of integrity, a woman of prayer. I used to get the hand-downs from the people, their shorts, their shoes, and their stuff. And my dad was a tailor in Salt River. He used to go to Cork Bay and take measurements to the fishermen, buy the material, take the pants back, and he was a tailor. They were humble. But my dad loved my mom. He used to call him when he had a drink in my black queen. The way he loved my mom that I try to do that to my wife so my children can see that.
Is that not the best gift, first and foremost, that men give to their kids is to look after, is to love their mother?
That is exactly my point. It's not about the material. It's all about the presence being there. It's all about the love, the respect, the community, And I was brought up in Salt River, which is today, at my time, it was the drug city. That's where the Mandeks flew in and out.
Sure.
And my mom and dad, they held their heads high. I went off the beaten path, but he was respected up till today. He still, he's dead now, when he greets, he tips his hat. When a funeral comes past, he closed the shop. And those are the small little nuggets that I was taught. And so the economy, is bad. The unemployment is bad. And we can't divorce ourselves and we can't blind ourselves to it. But the best thing that a father can bring to a home is the love, the security, and the integrity. I make an example. I've watched some people in Stellenbosch. I worked in Stellenbosch. You get the people, they're poor, but you go into their homes, their floors are clean, their pots are shining. And then you go to somewhere else, a Capricorn, which they just don't care. And those people that you can look at the house, you can see the love, the security, the prayer that goes into there, and that's divorce from any amount of money. And that's what I long for.
You say you grew up in that way. What would you do different from your own father, given this own role going forward? What would you do different?
Firstly, not go buy milk. That's the thing. Try my best not to desert myself and my family.
Buy milk, I missed that.
Yes.
You'll have to explain it to me.
They don't come back.
So it's a joke. So they either say you want to go buy milk or you want to go buy soap. So meaning they go to the shop and they never come back.
I see.
Yeah, absent father vibes. But I wanted to speak about the economic situation.
Yeah.
So at Kalas Foundation they have a community kitchen, and I kid you not, there's about 60% men and there's about 40% of women in that line. And it's I don't know if you know this, but I think there's a study done that shows that boys feel the urge to provide for their family from the age of 12 already. And then I look at the people in the line, and it's mostly men, and yet they might not have a job, but taking that Tupperware of soup, akni, whatever it is, taking that Tupperware of food home must feel so good in that moment. Having to provide for the family, even though I don't have a job, I can stand in this line and I can bring my family food home. So I think that's another great thing what community kitchens do for men that can't seem to provide for their families. Also, I see a lot of also the people that the working class in the community sometimes also stand in the community kitchen. Even though they might be working, it's still not nearly enough to get by. So they still come and stand in the line with even their work uniform on. And it's sad to see that even though you are employed, yet you employed, but you still can't even afford the basic standard of living. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's underemployment.
Yes.
In other words, you are working, but you're not earning enough.
Yeah.
To. Now, I'm fascinated by this because when I think about, there's a famous saying, "What's not transformed is transferred." Right. So if we've got a bad mental image of what our fathers were like, and we don't deal with that issue, we will transfer that. You will take that and hand it over to your kids. Let's talk a little. I want to focus now. How do we do to fix it? I can talk about the role of governments in this issue because I think that no greater time have we had to think hard about the role of fathers. And just to put a bow on the conversation about the economy, it's why I fight so hard about the township economy, because historically, we lived with a level of high migrant labor mechanisms. Yeah. You talk about your mother as a domestic worker. I can tell you that for many South African kids, those who grew up under apartheid only got to see their mothers on weekends because their mothers were busy raising someone else. Yeah. It always struck me that when I was in the Marikana Memorial, that here we were in the Northwest, and here were men killed in Marikana in a labor unrest. But when you ask the question, where were their widows, you discover they were all in the Eastern Cape. So the economics of migrant labor meant that for whatever reasons, these were men that were either have new families there or children there, or had left their kids to be raised by. So there is an economic thing, and I certainly think that we need to advocate for policies that keep people working closer to home. Because when I think about a mother, a father, who gets up at 4 a.m., goes to work, back at 8 a.m., 8 p.m., the quality of life in that home, they are not present. They may be providing, they may be, and we may argue that that's a very important thing, but they're not present. Let's just be fair. So there must be an economic remodeling that puts people working closer to home so that they are present. I think I'd love, sometimes I think that gangs are running our communities because there's no other structural leadership that sits around there. So maybe that's an economic conversation, but what if you were to do it now? Let's think about the next generation of kids. What can we do to make sure that we're raising boys that are healthier, that they themselves, if they so choose to be fathers, what could they do?
So as you said, what you don't transfer. And I always say that you can't be what you can't see. So if your father was not there, you tend to go off the rails, or you tend to not be someone different. So for me, I try to be the best actual role model in my community for young boys in my community, and that's where it stems from. I think there's a great going back to apartheid and the pass system. Even back then. So I love history. History was one of my favorite subjects on school. I'm only 20 years old, guys, so I don't know that much. So
you haven't lived through all the history.
Yes, I haven't lived through all of these things, and I can see that greatly. The past laws always keep people distant from each other and distant from their families. I mean, even today, sometimes my mom works long shifts. She comes home. I mostly see her on weekends and in the evenings. So it's very true what you said, and it's still happening as in today. And I think that to challenge these systems, even though the people come from broken homes and they don't have a father, I think that what we need to see is some people stop complaining and some people to stand up. Because everyone can just go, oh, these kids are the gangsters, they run in the streets, they're doing this and doing that, but do something about it. No one's standing up and say, okay, what do they need? Do they need assistance? Do they need resources? Should we start a program? Should we start a rehab? Nothing like that. Everyone's just like bashing at their heads and saying, oh, but you're doing so much bad things, and why don't you do something good about it? Okay. And I always say, the good people that do nothing are still bad people. That makes sense. Not trying to bash anyone's head, but yeah, thank you.
Oh, you bashed enough right there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about my own sons. I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. And I spent very little time for 20 years. Never supported them, never. Today, my son's girlfriend often asks you, why when you speak to your father, always, Daddy, 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 Daddy? Because they have a different culture, They call them moms Jay and Joe. She calls me, and we'll never end this conversation without saying, I love you, Daddy. And so the attention and what our sons need and what our young people need, I think it's fathers that are present, fathers that can be vulnerable, fathers that can be tolerant. Because tolerance is one of the things that we so me-centered. Everything is instant coffee, instant money, instant divorce. So we very little don't know what pochikos is. we don't stay, and we don't brew, and we don't give off. Everything is like a rush. So we spend no time with our sons, no time with our children, because we're so busy. Earning a new buck, wanting to be, wanting to achieve so much, and we we miss that time that our grandparents and our grandmoms used to spend with us. That time, there was a family. Now the family is disjointed by technology. We text each other to come and have supper. We text each other to meet. We don't have time. So that family unit needs to be re-established. Even if it is broken, a broken family together is better than a broken family apart. So we single mothers or even single fathers should still keep that unity, and I think that will help. Eh?
I mean, I think I'd be interested. You know, there's a famous saying, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. That whole thing. I often say the biggest failure we can face up to is that I think as a society we've lost our values.
Yes.
And so, whilst the statement "it takes a village to raise a child" remains true, but that village needs to share common values.
There we go.
There's no use
Yeah.
you saying to,
Yeah.
yes, I can take my child and live them with my neighbors, but
Yeah.
my neighbors are alcoholics.
Yeah.
And that child learns alcoholism.
Irresponsible.
Or like, if I invite my friends at home, I'm busy teaching my kids one thing, and all of my friends who arrive there come and teach them, come and behave in an abnormal way.
Or you
Like
sit in garage drinking.
yeah, and I often see that often happens. Fathers are like, listen here, don't drink.
Yeah.
And then the child is like, cool. And then their friends arrived and there's a whole drunkenness that occurs. I do happen to think South Africa, we have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
And whilst I accept the point that there are other issues that then go on, drugs and all of that, but we have a genuine issue with alcohol. I think you might say, as far as alcohol consumption all over the world, you might say, well, if different nations have got this, but our nation is wounded.
Yeah. Very,
Our
very.
communities are broken. Our kids are raising each other.
Yeah.
And add alcohol to that. If you saw anything during COVID,
Yeah. Yeah.
we saw the fact that actually ICU levels were manageable during COVID because there was no alcohol. We have an alcohol problem. People don't drink socially, they drink to get drunk. And once they are drunk, there is violence that's associated with it.
Loads.
Very often you find in homes there's instability and etc. And I do think, you know, rightly or wrongly, government regulation needs to think hard, because I think we're losing young men. We're using young men to alcohol in the droves. And then another subset of that, we're losing them to drugs and so forth and so forth.
Yeah. This goes on and on and on. It's just a recurring thing. And unless we do educate our people in what the addiction and the alcoholism is about, I remember firstly I belonged to a group called Alcoholic Victorious, and we used to go into schools and talk about that. But now it's offensive. It's an offense to talk about that, about the abuse of alcohol and drugs. So they don't want you to come into the schools anymore. And so I think we need to educate from government level what it means. Yeah, there was lots of talk lately that there was rehabs built, the money was squandered, and it hurts. It hurts us that want to make the difference.
Sure.
So we're talking about a job in every home. Maybe we should have a rehab in every city.
Of course we must. And I mean, before we even get to rehab, I always think to myself, when I grew up, I played sport.
Yeah.
And I often think that the Ministry of Sport is wasted dealing with the unions.
Yeah.
What's the point of engaging SAFA, SARU, Cricket SA, all of them? Frankly, those unions will sort themselves out. And if they don't, that's an administrative issue, much less. But what we do need to sort out is to make sure that there's a sports field in every community, because
At the grassroots.
that's very good.
Yeah.
I played tennis. It gave me an opportunity to learn discipline and to learn that. So sports facilities matter.
Yeah, it does.
And I think you mentioned earlier, your father coming to watch games.
Yeah.
Man, if I speak to all of my friends, they all tell me the same story. They say, one of my closest friends tells me a story about how his father showed up totally drunk and how that was a total, it's the...
Yeah.
The best. I mean, I didn't. My father worked a lot of the time, so he never got to watch a lot of sports games. But I see now when I go watch my son how much
that means to him.
Yeah, and it also gives us something to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. On the
I mean,
way
I-
home,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
dinner table, it does. Yeah.
I mean, it's and it also stops him from other dangers like
Yeah.
supporting Man United. No, I'm joking.
Okay. Let's not go there. You see, let's not go there. They're not doing so well. Not doing well.
So let's just, as we bring this to a close, we have 13 million South Africans in school. I'm sure just a little bit less than half of them are young boys. What do we hope? Tell me your dream about what the next generation of young boys needs to look like, because I think it'll give us a sense upon which we could say, what are the things we need to do today to realize that?
Myself, I see the next generation of boys knowing who they are. I think this generation of boys is a bit lost. They don't know. They always succumbing to other influences, other peer pressures, negative influences, some positive maybe. So I want firstly for them to know who they are. Secondly, I want them to have confidence. I see not a lot of young boys are confident. They might be confident on the soccer field, but they might not be confident doing an oral in school. That makes sense. Also, I want boys to have some braveness, a little bit bravery. Sometimes I talk about things in the program, and some of them get scared they don't want to open that can of worms because what it might lead to, or they maybe have trauma of the certain topic. I also wanted to say something. You spoke about alcoholism and drugs. Was actually last week Friday's topic at the boys program, and I asked a question. I asked a random question. Name one drink. Some boys say Coca-Cola, Fanta, your usual suspects, and you get the few boys that go, a Savannah, a Castle Light, the Black Label. How can a boy at 12, 11 years old be thinking about beers? Wow. I asked some of them, have you drank before? I've tasted beer before. I'm like, wow. You really tasted beer before at that age? I'm like, it's crazy to see how much negative influences. And even, I spoke about even the use of drugs. Some of them have held drugs in their hand, sniffed it, whatever it might be. So I want them to not be easily influenced. And I also want them to be their own role model, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I want them to be what they want to see. So if they want to see a good uncle that has positive influences, this uncle that knows what he's talking about, this uncle that does well in his job.
Don't talk to me about uncles. Uncles matter, man. Like I always say to myself, I want to be. One of my most grateful things is that I've got a friend of mine who's an incredible uncle to my kids. And he's given them an uncle we both never had in that sense, like
Yes.
Because I know as a father to my kids, my coolness factor is decreasing every single day. I know I'm no longer I'm not the most coolest person. My son, but I know my friends who are around can reinforce that.
Yeah.
They look to them, which I think to that village thing. They talk to other influences.
Yes. So I think that uncle factor is very great. I lost my cool uncle factor like I had a few years back, and it broke me because it was that one constant father figure in your life that was so cool and would always challenge you, would always make fun of you, but yet you know how much he loved you. Yeah. So I think so inspired to be that good role model and a good uncle to other people, I think that's what I see for them there. So yeah, thank you.
I would just say to this young man that I will avail myself for you to talks. I will bring the team I'll bring the guys at presently going through these things so they can be some sort of role model to the young men we are at. And we would like to offer that help.
Thank you so much.
All right? And then I would just want to end with this, and this is what my dad taught me one day. He said, how can you make a difference? He said, how can you make a difference in the world? I thought, how can I make a difference in the world? He said, if there's love in your heart, there'll be beauty in your character. And if there's beauty in your character, there'll be harmony in your family home. And there's harmony in your family home, there'll be unity in your community. And this unity in your community, there'll be joy in the country. If there's joy in the country, there'll be peace.
Sure.
in this world.
Yeah.
I just remember that, and he's gone to be with the Lord many, many years ago. I remember those little things,
That's
little
powerful.
nuggets. Thank you.
You know, I think for me, firstly, we've got to move beyond just condemning of things, right? Like we condemn gender-based violence, we condemn everything in this country.
I know.
But now is a time for us to begin to think, what actions do we need to take? And I cannot dismiss the fact that we need to build good families.
Yeah.
Because if a child, you know, Mzwakhe Mbule, you used to quote this, "Ukulimala komndeni, ukulimala umphakathi," which means if the family is broken, the society is broken. And I think we need to see that happen at the moment. I'm not happy that I live in a country where the majority of kids are born to single mothers. I'm not happy in the fact that actually you're dealing with young people who are dislocated within communities, and so the only place of family they find is in gangs or all of that. I think we need to do better. We need to do better in the economy to make sure families stay together. We need to do better, even legislatively, making sure, you know, we've had debates about paternity leave, because it starts there, right? Like we give maternity leave. Countries are starting to realize more and more that, you know, so if you give 4 months, can you split them 2 months, 2 months? Give men the right to also raise kids for 2 months so that they can learn what nurturing, it'll develop those features within them. We've got to deal with social influences. So dealing with things like what happens in drugs, alcohol. I think we've had that conversation. We've got to improve educational outcomes. You know, I'm graduating in a few weeks' time, and often when I go to graduations, I sometimes think to myself, there are more women now than there have been men. So we're losing boys in the system. Somewhere we're losing them. When I was at the matric results announcements last year, when I looked around, the girl child is making, we focus on the girl child, sometimes to the neglect of, I'm not saying we should do more to also make sure boys are competing, succeeding in the same manner. And I think I've always wanted, I have this fantasy, and I'm putting it out there. I'm looking for a clothing company, right? Who every boy has to go to a matric dance, at least somewhere or somehow.
Okay.
But what I'd like to do is to get a clothing company to sponsor the best outfit for the boy who the girls in their class vote that boy is well-mannered, decent, all of the above. Because if the boys know the honor they give, the value they give, the sort of statesmanship that comes with that, and let the girls decide that. And if the girls vote for boy X in the class, let that clothing company dress them to the nines for that day, and they can keep that outfit. Simply because I think you're also trying to invoke a culture upon which the relationships between genders are healthy, because our interrelationship between genders are sometimes toxic. You hear a degree of feminism that eventually arrives at a point that says men are trash. I think that's dangerous. I think we should all be feminists who say we value women in the same way that we don't think that the extremeness of that, because you can also get toxic femininity, is not healthy. I think that's important. And then I think lastly, let's do our best as men to be the most ideal models we can find. Like I always think to myself, like, it's how, when I walk into a room, how do women feel? It's how I comment about women around the braai. Because my son's listening to that.
Exactly.
It's how I speak about his mother. It's about, it's about how I show up. That's why I love education, because I think we've got to show our young. My father didn't get as educated. My mother didn't. But I tell my kids, you figure out where I finish educationally, you got to go better than that. Because the dream of any parent is to see their kids go further than what they have. And I think the sooner we, on this Father's Day, not just make it a day you get socks on pajamas, but really hone in on saying, how do we have men that are whole. And so for me, my dream for the next generation of young men is young men who have a purpose, who understand what they want to do, who are well mentored, who are given enough opportunities, so that, and given the skills to learn how to interact, so that they don't think when there's a problem, I got to use violence.
Yeah.
But when they think, here are the skills that I can learn to be able to deal with the crisis before me. And then if we fix that and we build the economy that's able to keep young people purposeful and working, because I think there is a pain when you've done your degree and you're at home. There is a pain where you're a decent soccer player and you can't, There is all of those disappointing dreams. Let's help our young boys, because I think maybe we've gone at gender-based violence looking at extreme cases and condemning it. I wonder if we had healthy men, would we not have healthy homes? It's a question.
Thanks.
Let me leave it at that. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for coming. Thank you for
so
sharing
much. Thank you
on
for
this
having us.
conversation. It
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
certainly for me we'll continue the dialogue, because I think as men, they say men can't be vulnerable, which I can understand in some ways, because vulnerability means you're scared. But I think sometimes there must be a degree upon which as men, because I think when men are in trouble, they don't know who to talk to. And so suicide rates amongst young boys are skyrocketing. We need to get around to sitting around and just have these conversations. So I'm hoping this sparks a conversation. Call your son, call your boys, have a conversation. But the sooner we talk about what it means to be a man, the better we are. Thank you.
Okay.
Namaste.
Namaste.
So